Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host Paul Rook and we are recorded from the PA UK network. Yeah, there you go, I've remembered this week.
Exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network, I think.
Well, yeah, we're exclusive. We want them as well, so that's fine.
It's lockdown, don't you love it?
Oh, absolutely.
Brain goes to fudge, right?
Well, yeah. That's one way of putting it.
Oh, dear.
It's a little saying I made up there. Gotta love it, haven't you? Anyway, sorry, carry on, Paul.
Yeah, okay. Well, as you know, Kerry and Richard have joined me in the studio.
We gate crashed your opening, sorry, Paul.
Yeah,
sorry.
absolutely terrible. We'll have to restart that, I think.
No. We're getting far too used to talking on Skype. I think that's the problem, isn't it?
That's it. It is.
Yeah.
So, what have you been up to this week in lockdown?
Well, go on, Rich. You go ahead because you've not done that.
Thank you. I've actually started to venture out a little bit. The sort of like restrictions are starting to ease, but they're not sort of eased all the way. And obviously, I don't think that will be for quite a long time yet. But I've started to sort of like just go out and about and visit a few places of interest and just keeping myself to myself, really. But just sort of slowly trying to adjust to the new normal. Really?
Well, that's it. I mean, yeah, you've posted up on our group page. So if anyone's not on it, if you go to Facebook, look for our group page. It's just the Paranormal Concept Show. And obviously click to join. And you'll get to see all the places that Richard's been visiting.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I've been quite prolific the last couple of days, and there's some quite interesting places I've found, and they're all relatively local, so I've been using this time to sort of research my local area and sort of find places I didn't know existed, and there are quite a few actually coming up on the radar, so I'm quite pleased.
I see some of your pictures, and you was even fighting triffids to get to one particular...
Well, yesterday I was out and I've located an abandoned church, which I have been looking for a little while, and it is difficult to find, but I found it. I persevered, but the stinging nettles were as tall as me. This place was abandoned and in the middle of a wood, a classic sort of place, and yes, I managed to brave the elements. I'm going to charge the Paranormal Concept Show danger money now from when I go out on my photographic expeditions, so that would be appreciated. Some more dock leaves I will need to order for my next trip. But
I do believe, though, in the contract it does specify in small print that it's
at your own risk.
Your own risks.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, but you can try. The powers that be might.
And I will be having a blog coming out shortly, which will be available on www.paranormalconcept.com. That's hopefully going up towards the end of the week, and it will be sort of pointers, guidelines, and about my sort of little sort of like journey, sort of coming out of lockdown and visiting these sort of places. And sort of, I think a lot of people have actually got to start sort of thinking a bit outside the box if they want to pursue their sort of paranormal interests. And this is a very good opportunity for people to do this, I feel. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
And Kerry?
Yeah, there are things coming up now, aren't there, in regards to this whole situation about how we move forward in regards to paranormal investigation, but that's not what we're going to focus on tonight. I want to talk quickly before we get into our topic of the day that there have been more and more reports coming through of people experiencing paranormal activity in their home during lockdown. And it started to hit the newspapers and various things being said out on social media that I've been watching quite closely, actually. And this concept was actually quite interesting to me. Now, either you're in your home more, so you're noticing more things that happen, probably maybe every day, that all of a sudden now you're home, you're now noticing it. Mm-hmm. Or is it people's imaginations and their fear and anxieties actually being put out there? This is quite a good time to actually look at something like that. I don't know what you guys feel on this one, but This is what I was thinking. I was thinking you can look at it in two ways, can't you? Because we are all living under a heightened state of fear and anxiety. You know, you watch the news, you must come off the back of that with an anxiety. I don't know about you guys, but I do. You know, you look through your social media fears, it's all doom and gloom and conspiracy theory, and is it really what people are thinking or is it not? You know, it's a very confusing time. And all those, you know, all those emotions build up, don't they? We're not able to express them in a way we normally would. Or they don't diffuse in the way they normally would, because you don't go out and you're not living your normal day-to-day life generally. For people, you know, if people are out working, there's a huge anxiety to that. I remember before we went into lockdown, I was still working at that point, and the anxiety of that was quite apparent. You know, although you're still working with it and you're still doing your day-to-day and it's fine, but there's an undercurrent of anxiety, isn't there? So are people experiencing activity because it's real, it's there, and they're just noticing it? Or is it, as we've talked about before, the human side of things where we externalise that internal turmoil? What are your thoughts on that one, guys?
Well, I sort of think it's an interesting point, because I've sort of read these sort of like reports, you know, sort of news articles, and like you said, Kerry, I think it could possibly be, sorry to put a dampener on it, but a sort of more of an anxiety-related sort of response, as opposed to perhaps a paranormal one. But I'm not discounting that totally, but sort of change and the sort of anxiety does have an effect. It can create sort of a very sort of subtle, subliminal effect on your everyday sort of life. And even if you sort of are a bit sort of don't get fazed about anything, what we are going through is actually different, and it could just be sort of going over in the back of your mind, and you could be suffering quite a mild form of anxiety or sort of disconcertedness, and this could be sort of triggering sort of what you perceive to be sort of odd sort of things happening around you.
I sort of agree with that. I mean, because obviously people are staying indoors, you do notice more about your home. It could, because you're not going out and stuff, it could even, with your belief system in spirit, it could even sort of trigger off some sort of paranoia that, I don't know, if for example, you know, you can't find your salt or something, you know, and you're hunting around for it, and then you find it. Is it paranormal? Did a ghost move it? No, it's probably just you forgot where you put it, you know, and it can lead to that sort of paranoia.
Yeah, well, but I must admit, I'm finding all sorts.
It depends on what the activity is, I suppose, you know. Whether or not you can actually put it down to you moving something and forgetting about it, or, you know, as they say, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah, as I say, I've sort of noticed.
I know that with my brain.
Yeah,
been in the house now I've noticed a lot of stuff in the fridge I've forgotten about.
Exactly, but is it paranormal?
When we were talking to John Fraser, he referenced Rose Marie Barrington, if I remember right.
Oh, yes, that's right. I remember that,
she put it down as just one of those things, you know, and maybe they're small-level poltergeist activity. That was a concept that she had been exploring through her time. So it's not maybe, it is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, maybe, possibly. I have to say, anxiety, you know, you're talking about anxiety there. The people that suffer on a day-to-day basis in normal circumstances with anxiety have kind of said their anxiety feels better at this moment in time. It's almost like they've been given a reason to be anxious, which has taken off the I don't know why I'm anxious, do you know what I mean, kind of scenario. So it's a very strange, it is an incredibly strange time of how people are processing this, this whole situation. And it is, and I mean, I hate to use this word because everyone's used it 100 million times, which is unprecedented for this generation. You know,
yes,
this particular moment in history, it is completely unprecedented. And there's lots of comparisons being drawn with times in the past, which I think are important because we can learn from those times. But there's a lot of people joining dots where they're isn't dots to join. There's a lot of I have to say, the conspiracy, we talked about this last week, the conspiracy theorists are ramped up and joining dots here, there and everywhere where there aren't probably any. And it's one of those times where it's an underlying anxiety. I've had activity in my house. That's not unusual. I have no ghost story or tragic event that's happened in this house, so there's no reason for it, apart from the work that I do, which, I don't really talk about. I don't put it out in public, what I do behind the scenes. It's spiritual working, ritual work, that sort of thing. But I do have activity. I had a shadow person the other night. I don't think anything of it. I just, it's just one of those things, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't go running out the room screaming. It doesn't unnerve me. But it would possibly, if you have a occurrence in your house that you know about, say, for example, the house was the scene of a macabre murder or a suicide or something like that, that's going to add into the underlying belief system that, that was that spirit that's now haunting, and I'm noticing it because I'm here all the time. Do we think it's that, the story underneath it, isn't it? It's that that there's that ghost story there, or that occurrence has happened in that house, and that's lending to this situation, that then an unexplained occurrence happens and you're like, oh, it's got to be that person.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly, it is widely accepted or sort of theorised, particularly with poltergeists and phenomenon, that it is sort of emotionally sort of driven. I mean, whether you have the classic, you have the sort of like the very young girl, don't you, sort of going through sort of the teenage years, whatever, the change. And this, so, perhaps this is being sort of amplified with a lot of adults now, sort of, we're sort of having a bit of sort of mental sort of turmoil. And this could be triggering sort of very subtle effects around us. So, yes, I can actually see that happening.
Well, if you want to look at it in that way, then how many teenagers of that age? I've got 2 teenage boys in my house, and trust me, there's many, many nights. It seems to have been paranormal activity when it's not. It's just them walking around at night because they're not sleeping very well, because they decide that they're vampires and they sleep all day and are up all night. It's just a curiosity thought that occurred to me that, the reports that we're getting, it's just almost like we can't, on a lower level, everyday person, understand the complexity of the problem that is facing society in regards to this situation. Yeah. There are too many variables, too much information we don't know about this, and I'm sure even people in government would say there's still a hell of a lot of things that they don't know to make the best decisions. So they're making decisions on information they've got, and then 6 months' time it might be that wasn't correct, so they're having to remake decisions. It's because it's a time of mass misunderstanding of information. I'm going to put it in those terms. It is creating a lot of inner turmoil for the majority of people. Yeah,
or you could call this a collective turmoil, perhaps, the collective, the population in general.
Exactly. So if you've got this collective turmoil, it's not clear messages coming through from the government. The news are just fear-mongering, scaremongers. I mean, gosh, I stopped reading newspapers and watching the news many years ago because I just couldn't put up with the trashy. The media, I think, should be held accountable for the way they report these days. I think it's absolutely disgraceful. But having said that, the whole situation, regardless of where you're at in this, is full of misinformation or facts that we're not 100% sure of because of the data that's come through. We haven't quite got enough data, but they're telling us stuff, and it's translating to the home. And it's an ideal time, I think, for us paranormal people, or from the psychological perspective. And I'm no expert, I'm not a psychologist, I'm just a person with an interest in it, to look at things like that. And does it back up a certain belief system that we externalise the internal processes, or is it real? Is it real? It's fascinating to me, this situation.
Yes, I think in in the future, looking back on this sort of time we're going through, it's going to make a very interesting study, and hopefully there are sort of people sort of forward thinking enough that are actually sort of studying this now as we're going through it. So we should be able to get some quite interesting stuff, and perhaps come through in the not too distant future about the way this pandemic affected us as a populace and individuals alike.
Well,
anyway, I'm gonna take these soapboxes away from you now.
No, I've got
crack on with the rest of the show.
No, I've got a perfect link to this.
Yeah,
follow me through. How many times have I said you've got to trust me on this one, Paul?
Next week, leave the soapbox at home.
Well, no, it was just a really interesting concept to me when I was reading some of these articles that are coming out about this. And I was thinking, right, because, obviously we've been going out onto, looking at smuggling, and we've been looking at, this, all sorts of things. It's led us down like this little research pad. And we were talking about creatures of the deep, like the Kraken Awakes is the name of the show. And I was thinking, put yourself in the shoes of a sailor back in the day when the world wasn't explored to the level it's explored now. You're stepping from the land onto a boat with a completely unknown horizon ahead of you. You don't know a lot. You've got limited information on what you do. You know your job role on the ship, but you're going out to catch fish, or you're going out to transport a cargo, or you're going out to explore for new lands. If you think of Christopher Columbus and people like that, they were going further and further afield each time. Yeah. But the unknown, that was the key to this. This is why I wanted to discuss the first bit of my soapbox part, but it was that time, that stepping on to a ship with the unknown. You don't know what the weather conditions were going to be. We haven't got sat-nav or, GPS or any of the tools that we have now. It's, you against the elements, effectively, when you step onto that ship. Yes, you've got a task, but... it is that, isn't it? And I was just thinking, it's quite relevant.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you could... I suppose the best way that we could is to think of it is the only place really that we've got to go is up. So we've got space. And I know that obviously we've got the ISS station up there, but anything further out of our solar system we haven't explored. And I think that's going to be sort of like the next step in the space race sort of thing, space exploration.
But back in the day, it was a world exploration.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? So when we're talking about activity maybe occurring in our homes, because of this situation, the unknown, we've got a lot of current themes going on. You're stepping onto a ship to do this, and it's hardly surprising that mythologies and legends grow from that. I mean, we were talking about the Flying Dutchman and how superstitious sailors were last week. We talked about things like that last week, and it shows that they have a huge spiritual, effectively, belief system in regards to the elements and regards to the world around them. It wasn't an understandable place, so they made it understandable in their own way, through folklore and stories and ghost stories and, omens and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And this is so different. When we started looking at creatures of the deep, we're going to focus pretty much on two different ones today. That you can understand from that perspective why it became such a mythology of the ocean. You know what I mean? Because of this unknown, because of this, this pitching yourself against the elements, which you don't, at the time, you weren't understanding.
Exactly. I mean, looking out as well from the ship, I mean, you are confined to that small vessel anyway. But looking out, you've got a vast area, and it appears empty.
Yeah, because
what is there that you can't see?
Yeah, I should imagine you get the impression on the ship you're literally sitting on top of the boundary, isn't it? And it is the old saying, what lies beneath?
Yeah.
Can't possibly know. You can't possibly know. Now, the first...
But they had a really good guess.
Well, they were making... they were making, like, the story of from experience, a very unknowledgeable experience. You know what I mean? So they'd come across maybe a creature they'd never seen before, and then put in a folklore or mythology on top of that. And this is not a new thing. This is something that's occurred through life. You know what I mean? Through cultures and life throughout, the world, isn't it? It's just one of those things that they do. But, you come across a creature you don't know, and all of a sudden, you've never seen it before, possibly will never see it again in your life. So it becomes a huge thing. Now, the first creature of the deep we're going to talk about is the Kraken. Now, this one really, Paul loves this, don't you, Paul? you love a bit of the Kraken.
Yeah, but you sort of come at it from the Nordic folklore, where my knowledge of it would be from the Greek, because it was, different cultures had the Kraken, but obviously named different things around the world. But they all still had their same mythology around it.
Yeah, well, it's the history of the Kraken actually goes back to 1180 from Norway. So this actually, the first recorded, folk story of the Kraken actually does come from Norway. It's spread across. I found accounts from China, from like Greece, the Mediterranean, all around the world. People had reported encounters, I think is the word.
Yeah. With the Greeks in particular, they sort of put it down to that they sort of slotted it into the category with their gods.
Yeah.
And it was like a servant of their gods. So when Zeus was unhappy with whatever towns or whatever,
you're talking about Poseidon. Release the Kraken.
Exactly. Yeah.
Might have only been a Clash of the Titans thing, though, babe.
No, it was still in their mythology. It was still in mythology, though. That's...
Oh, no. The point is, you can find links of a creature, and this was the other thing I found when I was looking at the Kraken, is it crossed over with the sea serpent quite a lot.
Mm.
Yes, there's a lot of sort of similarities there.
Yeah, so they tend to nowadays look at it as one of the same things. Sea serpents and the Kraken, they kind of think it was the same sort of thing. So these do cross cultures, you know what I mean? As I say, I found reports in all sorts of places around the world on the Kraken. Very vague. They had an encounter with something. Yeah. They named it something, and that's what that was. But this is where we talked about, again, with terminology, isn't it? The culture will name it something. Doesn't mean it's different from what the other culture named it. Might well have been the same thing. They just used a different name for it. And it's distilling that down into one thing, isn't it? So the Kraken is, I have to say, for me, when you first said the Kraken... and this is probably about the 15th show where we've named Pirates of the Caribbean, which is this big mouth thing with lots of tentacles that rise up from beneath the ship, wrap its tentacles around and drag the ship down into the ocean, and everything's gone. All the crew are eaten by this Kraken, and it's a big, nasty, horrible kind of creature, right? Lots of teeth.
Mm.
Well, that's the iconic image. I was sort of looking for imagery for the show ad, because I always like to put a picture or something on it. And that image, you type in Kraken and go into Google Images, and it's basically that image that repeatedly comes up of the giant squid-like monster sort of lifting a ship into the air. Yeah, so.
Well, that's what I picture when. People mention the Kraken is just a giant squid type creature.
Yeah, it is sort of that kind of imagery, isn't it? And Hollywood obviously has taken it to that step further with the big mouth and lots of teeth and basically.
Yeah.
Now, if the ship
it wouldn't have the same effect if it was just called Ollie the Octopus.
It was true. Oh, hello, Ollie. How are you today?
Well, a rubbish movie that'd be. Can you imagine, Clash of the Titans, and just little Ollie the Octopus there,
swimming along next to the ship.
Release the Ollie. It doesn't have the same ring to it, does it?
No, it doesn't. But there are stories where this Ollie, it's now going to be known as the Ollie, swims around the boat, which actually creates a fierce maelstrom.
Yeah.
Basically a big whirlpool, which sucks the ship down and kills everybody on board, and the ship's gone, okay? So, this is really what we imagine this Kraken to be. And it is a big, fearsome, horrible creature that is awful. But it has also found reports where they used to search out the Kraken because it would follow huge schools of fish. So if you're out fishing, what bet you're going to look for big schools of fish because, and this is why this mythology creeps up, because if you're following a massive school of fish for fishing and then all of a sudden you come across this creature that's following the same school of fish, it's understandable how these two titans of the sea, the humans and the Kraken, sort of like hit together at times.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite, I sort of found that bit quite fascinating in the research, that fishermen would go and seek out Krakens because they knew they could quite possibly get a bountiful catch of fish. So, that's hedging your bets a bit, I think, but, good on them.
Brave sailors is all I'm saying. Now, the history of the Kraken goes back to an account written in 1180 by King Sverre of Norway.
Yes. No, you've got the Scandinavian accent going this week.
Yeah.
Good on you.
I'm doing well.
I can't wait for this bit because there's so many words that I know.
Oh dear, I looked at this earlier and I thought, you go, Kerry.
Oh, thank you. Then you notice they give me all the hard words to say, everybody. I'm going to mess this up, I'm sure. It's also referenced in a 13th century Icelandic work titled Over Ordre. Oh, I'm telling you, I've been practising.
I'll take that, yeah.
Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a hero saga. It mentions a sea monster named Hafgufa. Oh, I love these words. It's quite an emphatic language, isn't it? Which the description is very similar to what we would imagine a Kraken to be. It doesn't name it as the Kraken. The description describes it as such. And then another text around that time, which was actually a scientific journal, which was dated around, I like the way scientific, loosely, titled in 1250, titled Konungs Skugusha.
Skugusha. Skugusha.
Actually describes the Kraken in detail and actually comments on the monster's unique feeding habits. Because in that book it claims that the Kraken would regurgitate food particles from its mouth into the sea. The fish would then be attracted to the food, swarm to feed, and then woof, in goes the Kraken to scoop up the fish. That sounds like a whale, though, to me.
I'm sure I've heard certain sort of species of sort of sea life to actually do this. So there seems to be some sort of connection going on here. There are certain facets which are sort of known about for certain marine animals to do. So this is sort of like you're getting a bit of a crossover here between sort of fact and fiction.
And I think this is the thing, isn't it? And so this is where we go from our knowledge has grown and evolved over the years, and our science has as well. And so what they may think is a Kraken could be a whale or an octopus or something along those lines. Do you know what I mean? It's that crossover, isn't it, between knowledge and, scientific understanding of something and the knowledge at the time of the sailors. Bearing in mind, back in the day, we're talking, very early days in sailing worlds, they're not knowledgeable in regards to, what we know now.
And it's funny how this sort of comes from sort of Scandinavia originally, sort of during the 1200s. You're looking at sort of like the Viking era, and the only comparable sailors at the time were the Scandinavians. So this sort of it fits in. They were probably better placed to actually observe these animals.
I would say because obviously because they are seafaring and they go off, you know, and they had like the hard man image. So when they come back, you know, and they experience little Ollie the octopus out there, you know, they'd come back and they wouldn't want to say, oh yeah, you know, we slaughtered this little Ollie. You know, we come back and there was this giant octopus thing, Kraken. It had sharp teeth, and you know, I can see how they'd experience something so normal for us, but wanted to big it up to make them look a little bit more manly.
Yeah, sort of like to impress the girls down the pub when they get back.
Yeah,
I think
they might have impressed the girls down the pub more if they'd said, "Look, we've bought little Ollie the octopus."
Well,
I think little Ollie. Just chuckle. I think what this demonstrates is they saw something. They didn't know what it was because they'd never come across it before, or it was a rare sighting of something. So they knew something was there. They didn't know what it was there. So they made up a mythology regarding it. And because they've seen something that's unexplainable in their scope of understanding, and because the sea, like we said, the sea, it's like so deep, don't know half of what lies beneath, you know, what's underneath. It's inconceivable, isn't it? It's those inconceivable depths that they're not knowing. So it does take on that superstition and that folklore and that mythology, because they saw something, they witnessed something. It's a bit like paranormal. You experience something, you can't explain that. So you come to a logical assumption based on your knowledge base within what you do. So whether or not that bases up your confirmation bias in regards to, well, you know, I read a story from like the 1200s that talked about this mythical beast. It's got to be that. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's no different, I suppose, from what we imagine to be under the sea. I've read articles about megalodons, which are basically giant sharks. Now, we already know that sharks exist, that we've found that are like 300-400 years old. So could it be possible that one of these megalodon giant shark things are still down there in the deep?
Well, it's certainly something that is sort of been sort of like talked about a lot recently. That's sort of like, but again, that sort of comes off the back of a couple of novels that have been written at the moment, and they that are quite popular, I think.
Well, there was,
and
I think there
again,
was a book written in the 90s or 80s.
Sort of like
it's a series of books.
And that sort of reignited the sort, because I can remember the furore when Jaws came out, you know, so it's probably just and everywhere you went there was great whites just lurking off the beach ready to gobble you up.
There are, because now I won't go in the ocean because of that film.
Well, there you go.
Anything that touches my leg, it could be a bit of weed, it could be the water, I could be ankle deep in the sea, and it will be a great white shark about to eat my leg. Do you know what I mean? Unfortunately, that's what that film did for me. But no, it's that point, isn't it? We don't know. The ocean on Earth is, although we've explored a heck of a lot of it, there are places we've never been.
Yes. There's sort of, you know, we do know more about our immediate sort of space around us, and I mean outer space, than what we do about the depths of the ocean. So,
and they're finding new stuff all the time in regards to, you know, ocean. I mean, even down to, you know, we say that the Earth is at the most, you know, we know our planet, but there's still things that they're finding out on our planet, you know, that we don't know. They're still finding new species of animals. They're still finding, you know, when you look at that, and that's nothing to do with the water, that's just land mass, things you'd think would be quite obvious, you know, they're not. So the ocean is one of those, and it's so inaccessible. Although it's on our planet, you know, to do with the pressures and the depth of the ocean. Yeah. It's so, God, you could be right. There could be a megalodon, big, massive white shark that lurks in the depths. You know, I love watching studies, actually, of, you know, like where they get a carcass and then they film the carcass to see what animals feed on it. But they can only do that at a certain depth because of the the pressures of the ocean.
Yeah, because they control quite deep, but the problem is bringing them to the surface, because they tend to sort of like explode when they get to a certain depth and coming up, because they're so sort of pressurised to the depths they live at. You bring them to a lesser pressure, and their internal body pressure will just blow them up, actually. I mean,
well, we know just from a diver, you have to, when you dive, if you go to a certain depth, you come up in stages, don't you, because of the bends.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's why they have decompression chambers, because if you come up too quickly, you get blood bubbles.
Yeah, nitrogen bubbles, isn't it?
The bends.
Yeah, and you have to go into a decompression chamber, which, allows you to do that. So you can imagine if you're a creature who lives in the deep, that's not going to be very good for you coming up those into different things. So, if there are... Anyway, we've kind of got a bit off topic about what's up, but you can understand why, if they came across an encounter of a big animal that they didn't know before, that a mythology sort of comes across it. And, it is, we came across the Kraken, like stories that you tell in the pub afterwards, it does give you that kind of reputation, doesn't it? It does sort of build a reputation. One thing we do know about people is they love to beef themselves up. It's the good old fishing story of, I caught the biggest fish ever, and when you actually look at the photograph, you think, that wasn't that big.
It always gets bigger with every tale told about it, and every time you recount your story. I used to do a lot of fishing when I was younger, and I caught some whoppers.
Exactly.
Not.
I bet he told a few as well.
Yeah. Well, that's where the fisherman's tale comes from, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, the Kraken is usually described, and we kind of nowadays know, giant octopus or squid, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of in our heads now. When someone says the Kraken, we kind of know that. Half of that is to do with modern knowledge, but back in the time, it was also described as almost like a crab-like creature.
Ooh.
Right? So, I don't know where they got that one from.
Maybe it was a giant crab they saw then that week.
Yeah, perhaps they went, well, okay.
Now, Jacob Wallenberg describes the Kraken in his 1781 work, Minsul Pagalanja, or however you say that, which basically translates to My Son on the Galley. Now, this is a quote. It says, gradually Kraken ascended to the surface, and when he is at 10 to 12 fathoms, the boat had better move out of his vicinity, as he will shortly therefore burst up like a floating island, spurting water from his dreadful nostrils and making ring waves around him, which can reach many miles.
Ooh.
So
See, that to me describes a whale.
Well, when you think about whales, they do school, don't they? They do, you think of orcas. We've seen this on the Blue Planet with David Attenborough. They swim around and around to shoal the fish into one area, don't they? Dolphins do this as well, don't they? And then you get one that will come up from the underneath, straight up the middle, big mouth, krill. They do that with, don't they? Some whales do that with. Yeah. So you can understand how this... And you see the bubbles first, don't you, on the surface, where they're blowing bubbles under the water to create sort of like a pressure wave for the fish or the krill to go into a bait ball, they call it, a bait ball.
Yeah.
So, if you don't know what that is...
Yeah, to actually witness something like that, because you'll probably see the sea foam, and you'll also have probably flocks of seabirds circling above, because they're quite opportunistic. So that whole sort of incident, and if you view that from afar or close up, you'll think, it's quite easy to say, to sort of like think that the old sea hand on deck will go, oh yeah, the Kraken is sort of circling over there, and have a look, and they would actually see something.
I mean, when we see it on the TV, that is just a phenomenal piece of photography, I would have to say, in itself. But you go, wow, I didn't realise that. How many things have we seen about the, on that particular programme where you think, wow, I didn't realise that.
And these sort of and these events probably would have been more common sort of back in the day, as we know sort of whales unfortunately are declining and stuff, so these sorts of events are very sort of are not witnessed as much as perhaps they were sort of back in the Middle Ages and sort of the time that these sort of like accounts come from, because there do seem to be quite a lot of accounts which does suggest that this probably was quite a common phenomena to actually witness.
I mean, I didn't realise superpods of dolphins until I watched that programme, and they are enormous when the superpods get going, and they're not very common, but they happen. So if you've once in a lifetime kind of scenario, I would say that is, I think whoever filmed that was absolutely phenomenal. Again, phenomenal piece of work, everybody. If you haven't caught it, then go and watch it.
And if you sort of witness that, it'd be quite easy to sort of say they're being chased by something, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Chased by the Kraken, watch out, there's a Kraken here. Look, you can see all the dolphins jumping or whatever. So,
leaving the sinking ship. Something must be endangering them if they're just swimming like crazy for no reason in a mass pod.
But they're all feeling a little bit amorous.
We're actually it's just
amorous dolphins.
Just having a party, quite frankly. But you can understand why these mythologies and legends start occurring. You can understand why they start coming up. But I also think we need to look at maybe. Paul was referencing a massive-sized shark. The megalodon type thing.
The megalodon, yeah.
Now, the biggest mammal in the sea is the blue whale.
Yep.
It's enormous.
Pretty big.
Yeah.
Pretty damn big, right? Back in the day, the whaling industry pretty much drove whales to the point of extinction.
Yep.
Who's to say that the whales that they were encountering then weren't a hell of a lot bigger than they are today?
Yeah, well, that is
sense.
a possibility, isn't it?
So when they're talking about the size of an island coming up, you've got a massive whale coming up. We're talking in terms of whales on this one because we're looking at all angles. We'll go on to squids and octopi in a moment. If you've got that size whale coming up, a massive, massive whale coming up, size of an island, you can kind of understand almost how it would be a sight to behold. And also, remember the size of boats, everybody. We're not talking like a cruise ship kind of size.
No, they were little.
They weren't very big. So in relative times, your perspective, look at the size ship you're on compared to the size of maybe this massive whale or whatever. You're looking at the size. It's comparable, isn't it? It's, God, we're really tiny compared to that great big, great big monster of a creature from the deep.
And to see a sizable mass sort of rise up out of the sea, to witness that, it's actually quite something, I should imagine, to actually witness, even if it's sort of like still not leaping. Sort of, you can imagine sort of perhaps sort of like a whale, whether they sort of bask at the top of the sea as well on fine days. I don't know, but if they do that, you can imagine. If it's quite a calm day, it must be quite a sight to see.
And also, we're imagining these scenarios in calm, sunny conditions, bobbing about on the top of the ocean. You're in the middle of a rougher day and this massive creature appears from underneath. You're not just battling, you're battling the ocean. So you're pitting all your wits and all your manpower against just the ocean and the elements itself. And then you've got this great big creature appear next to your ship. I can imagine, you can see where it all builds up, can't you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now,
yeah, absolutely.
It's worth mentioning. I found this fascinating, actually. Amber.
Yes.
On certain areas of Russia, it washes up on the beach. It's actually really, a lot more than it used to. Back in the day. Obviously, people go and take it now because of the value of it. But they thought that was the monster's excrement.
Really?
That was called Kraken poo. Amber.
Okay.
But
nice.
Now we know obviously exactly what it is. We know it's tree resin, fossilised tree resin, and it's highly sought after. A good quality amber is, and as I say, that used to wash up on the beaches where it's being eroded from the the land and under the sea. It gets washed up, and it's really highly sought after and quite expensive if you get a high grade. Now that's a crystal side coming out.
Yeah, crystal side. You get it off the east coast here as well, can't you? I think in some sort of areas around sort of Norfolk, they do actually have a bit of amber wash up, but not into the extent they do in other parts of the world.
No, but they again, mythology grew up around that, saying that the Kraken produced some sort of aroma to attract its fish prey. So again, it's like regurgitation of food, or it's poo or anything like that. They would do that to attract the fishies.
Ah, there you go.
Could they, with like the aroma and stuff, could they not be confusing it with the whale? No, isn't it the whale vomit or something?
That's really high sought after as well, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you find a block of that washed up, you're quite made, because perfumers pay an absolute fortune for it, don't they?
Which is where the aroma thing comes from, because that is absolutely... Oh, God, there was a case, wasn't there? A case where somebody... I thought that was Norfolk, where somebody found a great big lump of it, and it was worth thousands and thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But don't you have to have like a special licence or something to sell it? You're not allowed to just trade in it. No,
we found it washed up on the beach. It's salvage rights, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's beachcombing and anything that washes up.
Yeah, but my point is you can't buy and sell it and trade it or anything like that.
No, because it's that rare.
It's protected.
And it only ever turns up by chance when people do find it on the beach. That's how sort of rare it is. So perfumers are very sort of anxious if a lump does come up on the market, they will bid quite highly for it. I mean, I don't know quite what they extract from it, the oils or something. I mean, I'm not too sure quite what they do with whale sick.
Yeah.
Does it say that on one of your bottles may contain whale shit, sick, Kerry?
No, don't include that on one of my bottles. And then they probably have got a way to do it synthetically now, probably.
Yeah.
In all honesty.
Yeah, I should imagine that's probably an older sort of thing. But when it does come up, I should imagine the perfumers still rush to get it so they can make some ye old authentic perfumes. Or colognes or whatever they were called back then.
Now, the Greek philosopher Aristotle, 4th century BC, in his work The History of Animals, actually had already distinguished the common squid, Teuthis, is that right? Teuthis? Have I said that one right? From its larger and rarer cousin, which could reach 2.3 metres in length. It doesn't translate to the sizes we're talking about, but they had recognised that these creatures were around and that they were, they could grow quite big, quite frankly.
Sort of 2 metres 3 inches. Yeah, that's sizable. Yeah,
it's not small, is it? Really?
You wouldn't want to tread on one of those whilst you're paddling, anyway.
No,
not really. And the Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder. Now these names keep popping up time and time again when we do shows, don't they? Aristotle, Pliny. We come across these, or Plato is another one. All these things keep coming up. Or these people, should I say, come up time and time again. These are kind of like, these people in their own right are very fore-fronted, ahead of their time people. They're not buying into the mythology or the thing. They're quite based in...
No, so in some cases they're creating some of the mythology. Because we've gone into mythology before that has started from Plato.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, even like the city of Atlantis, that started with Plato. So does that suggest then that, I don't know, Plato was just sitting at home bored one day and thought, well, what can I make up now that people will believe? And then he comes up with that. And because he's heard stories of the giant squid and stuff, he's sort of written about this. He ain't got no knowledge of it. He just makes it up as he goes along. And, hundreds and thousands of years later, we're still talking about it, going, well, he's writing about it.
So it must be true.
He said it.
Exactly,
Or is it a question of, you know, these great people, they loved a fictional side, but then they also loved the factual side, and we've just bundled it all into one now, and it's all got very confused because at the time they liked a bit of fiction, liked a bit of fact, and they've just put it all together.
Well, again, as I've sort of said on several and pointed out on several of the shows, it's conveying your message by overlaying your message onto a factual sort of basis, if you want to. And these Greek, especially the Greek philosophers like Plato, use this a lot in their dialogues, they called them, you know. So, yeah, it was a way to get the common person to understand what they were talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. Who knows, right? But
exactly. I mean, we can't forget the real victim in all this, Little Ollie the octopus.
Little Ollie the octopus, right. Now, Pliny the Elder, in his work, The Natural History, described a giant squid which had a body as large as a barrel and tentacles reaching 9.1 metres in length. So they were recognising that these creatures could grow to quite sizable.
Yeah.
You know, the squid and the octopus in particular, they could grow to these. And when you start looking at, you know, descriptions of these creatures, you know, the Kraken in particular, you are starting to build a more octopi squid creature rather than whale. So whether or not early sailors were getting confused between massive whales and octopi and squid, we don't know. Or it could be that they were, when there was a mass feeding frenzy going on, all these creatures were sort of feeding at the same time. We've just talked about birds being opportunistic. Squids could well have been as well. It might have been all in the one same thing, right?
Yeah. But they are saying that squid did have a predator, though, didn't they? Which was sperm whales. So you can probably see why the two actually go together, where you've got giant squid, you would also quite possibly have sperm whales sort of hunting them. So it could be a crossover, you know, sort of big bodily masses rising up and out of the sea with sightings of tentacles driving in and in the sea. It could be, you know, sort of like a sperm whale and a squid actually having a bit of a conflab in the middle of the ocean.
Now, even in the 18th century, it was still such a strong mythology regarding the Kraken, a belief in this Kraken, that Carl Linnaeus, who is the father of modern biological classification, apparently.
Clever man.
He even included that amongst the cephalopod mollusks in his first edition of his Systema Naturae in 1735.
Oh, right, so they were still sort of, up until the 18th century, still classifying the Kraken as a separate sort of entity. It was still believed that there was such a thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He actually undertook the task of classifying all living creatures on Earth, and he actually did include the Kraken. So, you know, he named it Microcosmus marinus.
Microcosmus marinus, I like that name, yes.
Once it got, you know, that was in the 1735 edition, but then it actually got omitted in future editions. He actually took it out, the book, in future editions. So I think, you know, he actually noted it was a unique monster that inhabits the seas of Norway, but I have not seen this animal. And because he hadn't seen it, he took it out.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it didn't exist, he just hadn't seen it for himself.
Yeah.
Now, Bishop Eric Pontoppidan, what a name that is.
Pontoppidan, yes.
Describes the Kraken as the world's largest animal, and in his work, The Natural History of Norway, they liked a bit of history in natural world, didn't they, in Norway? Now, you would think it was more scientifically orientated, being as it's called The Natural History of Norway, but it actually is more mythological. So, you know... I
think he tried to beef it up, didn't he? He was sort of like, he sort of give it a good scientific name, but I'll be able to include a lot of sort of shady stuff in here.
It's a bit, I suppose it'd be a bit like me trying to write a book on geography and everything's near Clacton.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Now, a lot of he tried to pass himself off as scientific, but he really wasn't. He reports that when the Kraken rose from the sea, it could be mistaken for a mountain. Its colossal size made it more similar to an island than to an organised being.
I'm just reading down some of this and some of the things he's saying. Yeah,
I know, right? He tells of a tale that an entire regiment of soldiers could actually practice their battle manoeuvres on the Kraken's emerged back.
That's really cool. I like that.
You know, this is how big he reckons this is. This really, I think, is a story of the fish was this big, but in actual fact it was actually this big.
Well, he really let himself and his imagination fly with this one, didn't he?
He did, didn't he?
Yeah, just a little bit. He claims that reports of floating islands were common in those days. And he also tells of a story of the Bishop of Nidros who confused the sleeping Kraken with an island, that they all landed... Oh, excuse me. The men and crew landed on the monster's back, celebrated Mass, as you do, and only realised their mistake when the creature woke up.
I just imagine they had the shock of their lives.
How much rum had they had on that day? It's kind of what I was thinking when I read that.
Maybe they were drinking Kraken rum.
Well,
yes. Kraken rum. You had to get...
That's why he woke up and he was annoyed.
His imagination certainly ran wild, and I would say a huge amount of exaggeration went into that. But I have to say, when I was reading about Pontoppidan, my little heart was like, oh, bless him. He was having fun. Oh dear. And he was definitely one of these that overlaid facts with fiction, and he just really,
he must have had a right chuckle when he wrote that, you know.
Oh, he was very serious. Took himself dead seriously. He could have been one or the other.
Yeah, talk about artistic licence sort of taken to the extreme. But, you know, he's left us a good little anecdote in history, hasn't he, to sort of amuse ourselves with.
Oh, most definitely. Bless. We can laugh at it now, but we don't know how he took it at the time.
No,
he might have been just, you know, recounting stories that he heard in regards to trying to back up a scientific fact.
Yeah.
You don't know, do you? But...
No, he's trying to make it fit, isn't he?
He is, but he also reported the monster's habit of blackening the sea with a gush of dark liquid.
Now, that does sound familiar.
That sounds very familiar when we talk about squids or octopus.
Because now you're getting sort of like the changeover now, you know, this is actually starting to be identified now. Mm-hmm. You know, it seems to be coming out of the realms of myth into perhaps some sort of basis of fact.
This is true. And he also claimed that the monster expelled water by its nostrils, which is another behaviour that we link to cephalopods.
Yeah.
Cephalopods.
Which use jet propulsion as a means of quick locomotion. I love that terminology.
Yeah. Well, you see them on the telly, don't you, when they do it? You know, it looks, they use it to, like, for quick sort of spurts of speed to get away from predators and stuff like that. And they don't half shift, some of them, doing it.
They do, don't they?
Gotcha. And actually, I mean, Paul loves a bit of an octopi, don't you? You find them fascinating little creatures in their own way.
Yeah. They're... Only because they don't share any common DNA with the rest of the natural world.
Really?
Really?
I know, I find that fact absolutely astonishing.
They're strange little things, and where did they come from? It's quite interesting to see their evolutionary path and how it differed from ours originally.
Okay. Okay, I don't know quite what to say about that.
They make good eating, though, if cooked right. I can say that. But that's
no, they're just disgusting.
But these behavioural habits of creatures like this, again, we've talked about this. They're across the culture, and you know, you find tales in China and Japan, very similar monsters in their folklore, and it kind of does make you jump to the assumption that they're all one animal. You know, they're one type of animal.
I think squid are worldwide, aren't they? They're sort of found more or less everywhere. Sort of like you get them here in like the northern waters, you know, and and especially down in the South Pacific area, which they're quite Yeah, there's a lot. I know when I was living in Australia, I used to do a lot of fishing, and squid, or calamari, as we turned it into quite quickly after we caught it, was, quite abundant.
And as me and Richard were talking before we joined you, Paul, last night, we were saying that if you're going to have calamari, it's got to be fresh.
Oh, yeah.
You can't have this frozen stuff. You've got to buy. If you have it fresh out the sea, cooked fresh from the sea, it is the best thing in the world. But not the frozen rubbery stuff.
No, just leave it in the sea. Let it live.
Have you never tried calamari?
I have tried it and found it absolutely disgusting, and I'll never try it again. But I'm not like that with most sea creatures anyway.
Most sea creatures, yeah.
The only fish I'll eat is cod. Evil little things, and they deserve to be on my plate.
Right, okay. Anyway, on that bombshell, we've actually come to the end of the first half of the show. We're going to take a quick break, so join us back after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And we're back in the room on the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, talking all things Kraken.
The Kraken awaits.
Paul's favourite sea monster mythology, I would go with.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah. He does like a Kraken.
He does.
Yeah, so behave yourself, or I will release the Kraken.
Oh, to release the Kraken, yes. Wasn't that Percy? Was it Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief? Is that from? Getting a film quote in there.
Titan.
Oh, is it?
Clash of
right.
Titans,
I
yeah.
thought it was Percy Jackson.
Oh,
I like that
Poseidon.
film.
It would have it in a locked underwater cave, and he would swim down with his trident, open the gate. Up come the Kraken, yeah.
It was Perseus, though, so I'll give you that link.
Oh,
yeah, he was involved in that. Anyway, the oldest certified record of a giant squid was by naturalist Gepetus.
Gepetus?
Mm-hmm.
It sure was.
It was
Based on your research.
The carcass was found in Thingor Sand in Iceland in 1639, and this was around the same time that whalers began to realise that sperm whales hunted regurgitated fragments of huge arms when killed. So they'd kill them, slice open their belly. That's all I can say to that.
Yep.
Oh, the smell. Could you imagine the smell?
Well, yeah.
I don't think I want to be fair.
Because they would do that to get rid of a lot of weight.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could have
Get
sort
rid
of,
of the bits you don't want, right?
Yeah, as soon as they got the whales on deck, they would have been straight at them, sort of dice and carved them up into bite-sized pieces. Oh, dear.
So, they'd find huge arms inside them and stuff like that. And they obviously, as you would, go, oh, he ate a Kraken, or it's got a Kraken on him.
Yeah.
And in 1853, a giant cephalopod was actually stranded on a Danish beach, and Gepetus Strenstrup just recovered the animal's beak. Now, the rest of it had actually been cut up and used for bait. So they weren't that bothered. They weren't going, oh, my God, weird creature, don't touch it. They were going, oh, let's use that for bait, on our bait ships and stuff like that for fishing. So the only bit that was left was the beak.
Okay.
Of the animal. And so that's how come they sort of realised it was a massive giant cephalopod, and that's where the first title of giant squid, or Architeuthis jute, or ducks, Architeuthis ducks, came in to the scientific community. They actually named it. That's where it first got its first name, by Strenstrup.
So this was when it was officially sort of recognised as existing or given an actual zoological name.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't got many more details of it than that.
No.
I don't know how big it was.
So I think that is sort of like the prime example of the paranormal becoming normal.
Yes.
Exactly.
Something that they couldn't explain before, that they put down to a mythological creature, now becomes scientifically explained.
Yeah.
So amazing. Absolutely amazing. And the Kraken, and there it's got an official name. It's part of the squid family. It's a cephalopod, so it's got an official categorization. So the Kraken becomes defunct as a name in regards to scientifically looking at something. So from now on, it's now the giant squid.
Yeah.
Or Archaeoteuthis ducks.
Archaeoteuthis ducks, that must refer to the beak or something.
Yeah. Well, it's ducks, so it's DUX, not duck.
Oh, right, sorry.
And in French it'd be canard.
Canard, yes.
Very good, Paul. Very good indeed. Yeah. So then you've got the definition of mythology, fact coming through now, and we're separating those two facts through, aren't we? Those two areas. Yeah. And the most famous recorded of a giant squid is out of the French vessel Alecton, whose crew, and this is in 1861, harpooned a squid of about 7.5 metres in length close to Tenerife.
Ooh.
Right, that's the Canary Islands, near Clacton.
Yeah, near Clacton, yeah. That's where lots of holidaymakers go. You wouldn't go in the sea there, would you, Kerry?
No.
Not anymore.
You might have 7.5 metre squid.
That's the whole Canary Islands off Kerry's holiday itinerary now. There's not many places left in the world.
I think after doing these shows, I don't think there's many places left.
It's just the Isle of Wight, my dear.
I know, and I won't go in the sea off there. Anyway, when they actually tried to drag the animal on board, the body broke up, and they only managed to receive the top of the mantle of it. So that's what was recorded, but 7.5 metres, that's nothing to be sniffed at, right? That's quite a large squid.
Yes, you would certainly sort of, that would make you stand back and think, whoa, just that.
Exactly.
And when they harpooned it, got on board, they went, whoa.
That's a big squid. Right. Now, Newfoundland Island in Canada, wow, now this is a right little hub.
Okay.
If you want the giant squid. In fact, actually, if you want anything to do with massive mammal creatures, because they have a lot of whales off there as well, don't they?
They seem to have everything. That seems to be on the main sort of migratory route, doesn't it? For, well, especially whales. You often hear them travelling down the sort of like the east coast of the United States during sort of mating season. They always seem to come from the north, don't they?
I'd love to go and see whales. Actually, that's one thing I would like to do. Anyway,
that's just up the M4.
Just up the M4, yeah. I'll have to go to Newfoundland Island in Canada. Many species were discovered there in 1871 onwards. Of the first mammals that they found, or animals, that they found, nothing remained. But two fishermen recovered a piece of tentacle from an animal that supposedly had attacked them. They took the tentacle fragment to a Reverend Moses Harvey, who's only an amateur naturalist.
Oh, right.
But in 1873, Harvey actually managed to secure a complete specimen that was still alive when it was captured.
That's always better than just having a bit.
I would agree with that. Now, there's a very famous photograph of this, and it's out there to view on any of the, just type it in, and Reverend Moses Harvey is the person you need to Google for that one, and you'll find this photograph, because when you look at the photograph, it's quite a large specimen, I would have to say. And actually, as I say, when we talked about the size of ships, in relation to that particular animal, you can understand why they maybe was like, you understand why the mythology came across this, and if there's bigger than that as well, who knows, right? But it proves that the species can get to that kind of size.
Yeah, it was the first sort of inkling, I suppose, they had. I thought, this is the same as the other one that came up, but it's a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Now, he actually called on the assistance of a professional malacologist, Addison E. Virrell, and until about 1881, about 60 specimens were stranded on the beaches of Newfoundland. Now, this was allegedly put down to the change in ocean currents, which is why they had so many species being washed up, which we do see this around the world, whales and dolphins beaching themselves, and not getting back into the water. So, it's hardly a surprise, right?
So you could argue that it's sort of through climatic change, which I suppose the change in the sea currents would be, this sort of, this brought this sort of amphipod, whatever they're called, to more public attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's because of his profession, it's taken with more relevance and credibility. We're now coming out of sailors' reports. We're now coming out of mythology, and we're coming into proper scientific research on this. And we're given the opportunity because of the changing oceans currents and them being washed up on the beaches in Newfoundland. So we've got, the perfect storm for study, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Virrell was the one who took responsibility for studying those that were not destroyed by the fishermen. I can imagine the fishermen were like, yay, another giant cephalopod, let's use it for a bait. He's probably
more bait
on the beach giving it, no, I need to study this. And he actually described the species as Architeuthis princeps.
Yeah.
I'm sure every scientist who ever listened to our show cringes at my pronunciation.
Oh dear, yeah. They're all hiding behind the sofas.
I bet they're all racing to change their names by default just so that you can pronounce them.
Oh, probably. Quick. Yeah. Let's change my name to something really unpronounceable and see how she manages that one. Now, after about 150 years of research into the giant squid, bearing in mind this is worldwide study, there is still a debate as to whether it's one single species or as many as 20 different species of the giant squid. So, the largest ever has been recorded as 18 metres in length. Now, obviously, this includes the tentacles, but 18 metres in length.
That's massive.
That is a huge piece of meat.
I think the further deeper you go down into the sea, the bigger they may become.
There's that, and there certainly seems that, and they do tend to break apart easily, as we were talking about earlier, because the tentacle parts, they don't really have control over them, and I think they just use their buoyancy in the sea at depth to keep themselves all together. That's probably what helps it, because they're not sort of like the tentacles are sort of pretty much free flowing.
Yeah.
And I think when they do attach, they just have hooks sort of like along their tentacles with suckers, and that's basically how they acquire their prey.
The giant squid's eyes are the largest in the animal kingdom and are crucial in the dark depths that they inhabit. Now, they reckon they are down in depths of 1,100 or maybe even 2,000 metres deep.
That is deep. The pressure's down there as well.
Yeah.
Think about that.
I know, right? That's deep. Now, the species... and what they do is, with a species, they look at the smaller ones that are easier to study and sort of size it up. So some of this is assumption, some of this is, knowledge on regards to the species as a whole. They all have sort of similar... It's like you're looking at... If you was to study the human race, we've got hundreds of different variations of human, but you're taking one of each kind of section, I suppose. I'm trying really hard to be politically correct on this. And, you would look at common traits. We all have two eyes, we all have two arms, we all have two legs, we all, poo from the same place. And
would one of these 18-metre length squids be 18 metres in length when they're alive down at 2,000 metres? Or do you think that the pressure would squeeze them into, I don't know, maybe a foot long?
No.
And as they come up, they expand.
No, I think if anything, they'd be larger under the sea.
No, I don't. Under that pressure, I think maybe there'd be. Okay, I'm going to the extreme there, but maybe I don't know, a couple of inches short or something, but because of the pressure.
Perhaps that's why they can grow so large, is because of the pressure. Because the pressure, as I sort of surmised earlier, is what holds them together. It seems once you get them up to sort of shallower or get them on a beach, they just literally fall apart.
And they expand, and because they're expanding, their skin mass or whatever it is becomes weaker, and that's why they break apart.
Possibly. We'll have to get a biologist on the show.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, but I would have thought it'd be the other way round. They're expanded under the sea, whereas when you bring them up, they're not. So,
no,
I don't know.
Logically, it works the other way around, I would have thought, but...
No,
we're not biologists, so...
No. In their muscles, that contains an ammonia solution that is denser than seawater. So this allows the animal to float underwater. So that's what gives it its steadiness when it's not swimming. So the presence of unpalatable ammonia in their muscles is probably the reason they think that the giant squids have not been fished to near extinction, because they're so deep.
Yeah.
Because of this ammonia.
Because at that depth.
Because it's the depth that they're at.
And if they've got naturally buoyancy, they can just sit at certain depths and just sort of float along with the currents. I should imagine, and
I should imagine that's the case.
Well, again, their habits, the giant squid's habits, have been debated from the scientific community for many, many years. But in 2005, a film was made from Japanese researchers. Oh, God, it's Japanese now, isn't it?
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. Get the popcorn out, everybody. You'll like this bit.
Kaburodera and Mr. Mori. That actually showed a live squid in its natural habitat, 900 metres deep in the North Pacific.
Yeah, that's quite a famous piece of footage. I've seen that several times, and that is available on YouTube. It is quite something to look at. It doesn't look that big, but that you have to take their word for it. It is that big, but as you say, Kerry, and it was the first time that they had real solid concrete evidence that these are what they are, swimming around at that depth.
And that they're fast and powerful, and they use their tentacles to capture prey, rather than being an ambush hunter where they just sit on the bottom and wait for the fish or whatever to swim past.
I think, although these squids and stuff are pretty much near the top of the food chain, they are hunted down by sperm whales. Because they love calamari.
Oh, I'll be a bit of fresh calamari. You're right, and it's common to find scars on whale skins left by squid tentacles and arms.
Yeah.
Which talked about the suckers lined with sharp tooth.
Sort of like barbed hooks, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. So again, when we look at whales now, and again, it increases with knowledge, doesn't it? Before, when the whaling community was going on, they didn't really examine whales. They're just like, as a whale, and we just want all the blubber and whatever else they took out of a whale. They weren't looking at the scarrings and stuff like that. They do this on whales a lot more now. Not whales, they do this on sharks as well, don't they, for identification?
Yeah, that's right.
And stuff like that, fin shape and damage and scarring on the body. They use that as a form of identification. Well, they now do that with whales, which again is a scientific moving on, and it's not just for food. We're now doing it for scientific study reasons. But the squids don't actually have muscles in their tentacles. They use them to constrict prey, but it can't overcome a sperm whale in a duel. Its only option is actually to flee. So it can fight back, as it were, but it won't ever beat the sperm whale. the sperm whale will always win.
Well, yeah, just by sheer body size, and you think a squid can't eat a whale.
Yeah.
So it's obviously the whale going to the squid for, to eat it or whatever. Yeah.
They can't constrict the whale enough to kill it.
No.
So its only option is to flee, and it does use the ink cloud to do that.
Yeah.
That's going to be some massive ink cloud,
Ooh, yeah.
isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you sort of see them on the telly when octopuses and squid sort of do it, and they're just little things, and they can eject quite a fair bit of ink as they sort of shoot off into the vista.
But they are very elusive.
It can't be that bad because, like, I've seen during lockdown, I've seen quite a lot of cooking programs lately, and they've been cooking, I don't know, some weird stuff, and they put squid ink in it to make it look black.
Ah, that's what they do with that pasta, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's squid ink pasta that's black.
So basically, it's all right to annoy a squid and then stand there with your mouth open. It's like, really?
Well,
I mean, black food does sort of like doesn't appeal to me, so I wouldn't eat that in a million years, but people do.
Oh yeah, fancy restaurants and all that.
Wow, we'll be coming on to that at the end of the show.
I'd be insulted if someone. I'd be insulted if someone gave me a plate full of squid ink. It's like.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can use squid ink in some rituals. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. I'm sure in my
squids use it.
banks.
Squids use it to tell their prey or whoever's hunting them to go away politely. Are they trying to tell me something? Maybe.
Maybe. You don't know. But anyway, the Kraken mythology is alive and kicking thanks to modern media. Pirates of the Caribbean we've referenced, but there's been plenty of other mythologies, Clash of the Titans we've talked about, there's loads of films and video games and books and paintings that reference the Kraken in its full mythological glory, even though nowadays we have a more prosaic image of it just being a giant squid, everybody.
Well, yeah. But long live the Kraken, though. Good story.
Good old story, right? And as I said right at the beginning, when I looked into this, I was looking at sea serpents as well, and there was general thought now is it's the same in the one. It's just culture. If you go to more the Asian and Eastern kind of cultures, they refer to them more as sea serpents, but when you look at the descriptions, it's the same kind of creature.
Yeah, it's the same creature.
So think sea serpents, think squid.
Yeah.
Now, the other one we looked at quite in depth, love a mermaid.
Oh dear, I've got to put my girly hat on now.
Girly hat, little tail, beautiful girl, swimming in the sea with her coconut shells covering her bare breasts. And, it's very sanitised nowadays at what our image is. But reports have come through time and time again of mermaids being sighted. It's in logbooks all over the place, which we'll come on to in a moment. But most of this is actually an oral tradition. Most countries have stories of mermaids. And actually, if you want to go on YouTube, you can actually find videos of the good old mermaid.
Oh, yes. There was a famous National Geographic documentary, or mockumentary, they called it, a couple of years ago now, which sort of got a lot of people going. It was good, but...
Are you saying these ain't real? You're going to...
Oh, well, I think compared to the Kraken, I think mermaids, yes, they are pure folklore.
I actually think you're right on this one because, these I think are where we go into what you would look at in regards to pure mythology, in regards to creatures of the sea. There's nothing nowadays that we can go, we reckon, like with the Kraken, we can look at it scientifically, and we can go, okay, so in the 1800s somebody had an encounter, chances are it's a giant squid because of the way it acts, and we've got smaller versions that we kind of like can relate to. Half man, half fish, we've got nothing that can relate to it. And creature-wise, if you want to relate it to a creature, I'm sorry, but what some people have said, I think they must have seen this. It wasn't a mermaid.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a sea cow?
Yeah, Amanda.
Yeah.
They're gorgeous. They're totally cute. But if you thought that was a mermaid, what the hell was you on when you were thinking that?
They were drinking Kraken rum.
They must have been drinking Kraken rum. This is where we go. Yeah. Maybe it was a good thing to reduce the rations of rum or beer on board.
Absolutely.
With the Kraken, they did actually come up with something, that was feasible. But the sort of like what they were trying to present that might be mistaken as mermaids is totally off-centred by a long way. There's nothing out there
that we can
that we can compare.
That you can compare to.
People were mistaken for or anything. There's nothing. Well, any sort of sane-minded person would mistake for a mermaid.
Well, they probably thought that about Krakens a while ago. Who knows, right? I mean, we're making, on the knowledge we have today, I would doubt very much if it was a manatee. Dead cute creatures. Check them out because they are so lovely. But I wouldn't have said that they were mermaids. And if you think that looks like a beautiful woman...
See, a lot of people have confused mermaids with sirens.
Yes.
And I can understand where the sirens, the myth of those come from. Because even like listening to the wind, it sometimes whistles and stuff, so they could say that it's the sound of the siren. And they come up with a whole myth surrounded that.
Yeah.
And it sort of got confused with mermaids. Maybe that's where it sort of born from.
And as you say, Paul, I think mermaids is an evolution from the sirens.
Yeah.
Or, again, it's two different mythologies that are just mixed together, and it's just, again, it's down to terminology. Some cultures would call them sirens, some cultures would call them mermaids, but again, this is worldwide. This is not something that's like a local tradition. You get some areas that have got higher mermaid mythology, but you've got others that, still have it. It's just not as apparent when you start digging. But it is incredibly thick. Now, it's been reported sightings by explorers and sailors are actually quite common, believe it or not. They were described as having a torso and head of a woman but the tail of a fish. Now, mermen. Yeah, have been sighted as well. So we're not talking like it's just a girly thing. Men are there as well.
Going back, obviously, through the centuries, I mean, it wasn't just mermaids, but it was mermen, as you said. The Babylonian god of the sea had a lower part of a fish and the upper part of a human. So maybe that's sort of where it crept in to Western theology.
Yeah, there certainly is a sort of like a religious significance to it. There certainly seems to be some religious iconography because fish, people with sort of torsos of humans and and the lower half of fish. And as you say, Paul, I mean it's certainly in Babylonian mythology and even this is carried on through into modern religion, like the Catholic Church. I mean, the priests wear the mitres and stuff, and that is a direct sort of throwback to these sort of early sort of fish deities. And it's interesting to note that Christianity is also sort of represented by fish in certain cultures as well.
Yeah.
Well, the reason they had the fish as a symbol of Christianity was because there's that story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with fish and water, basically.
Yeah.
And that's where that sort of come from. And when Christianity was outlawed in that particular region, the Christians went into not hiding, and they used the symbol of the fish to show other Christians that they were
there. Anyway, going back to Babylonian, god of the sea, like Paul said, it has a lower body of a fish and the upper body of a human. He was actually a patron saint of cleaners, and then this is where the Poseidon and Neptune mythology comes in, because they kind of adopted that and came through. And actually, if you look at trading routes from that culture, the Babylonian culture, it goes very much into the Mediterranean area, so it's quite you can see the cultural leap there.
Yeah.
And a few thousand years later, the ancient Syrian goddess of Atagadis.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah. Well, she dove into a lake and became a fish, but only her bottom half was transformed, and the first mermaid was created. Now, that reminds me of if she dove into the lake to become a fish, half human, you can see where the Little Mermaid comes from, where she leaves the water and gets her legs back.
Yeah.
Right,
you can sort of see the origin there stepping in, don't you? Now, Assyria was the empire of the ancient Near East, which is you looking at Iraq, Asia, Turkey, down through to Egypt, that area. And as early as the 25th century, this is where this story comes from. Now, she was actually a goddess of fertility, but she was also responsible for her kingdom's protection and well-being. The Greeks called her Derceto, and the Romans called her Dea Syriaea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, you remember last week when we were talking about ship fronts?
Yes.
Bare-breasted women?
Oh, yes. To calm the seas, wasn't it?
Calming the seas. Now, on some ships, they would actually put a mermaid on the front, bare-breasted, of course, because the belief system is mermaids or women, bare-breasted, could calm the seas. So mermaids came from that.
Oh.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, yeah.
I
can see that working.
I know, right? But I think it's just men like bare breasts, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think,
which is what we
sailors.
talked about last week.
There's so much we could go down on that, but yeah.
Well, we did the kind of last week, so if you want to know a bit more about what the lads thought of all that one last week, you need to go back and listen to the show on ancient legends or ancient superstitions of the
Legends of the Ancient Mariners.
Thank you for filming in on that.
It was only a week
all,
ago.
all our past shows are on our website at www.paranormalconcept.com, and they're all listed, so we've got to just click on the link and just have a listen.
And as I say, we've gone through kind of like a whole little section of mythology and superstitions in the last few weeks regarding these kind of things, so go back and have a little listen, because it's very fascinating how this has how the shows have transpired through.
How we've navigated the seven seas over the last few weeks.
Yeah.
It's been quite a good adventure. I'm enjoying it.
Well, it's carrying on, because we're carrying on next week, but I'll tell you about that at the end.
More about that later.
Yeah. Now, I found a couple of accounts from logbooks, which are absolutely fascinating. Now, this is from the logbook of Henry Hudson in 1608. And he said, "This morning one of our company looked overboard, saw a mermaid. From navel upwards, her back and breasts were like a woman's, as they say that saw her. Her body as big as one of us, her skin very white, and long hair hanging down behind of colour black. In her going down they saw her tail, which was like the tail of a porpoise, and speckled like a mackerel."
Maybe they were just drunk and just saw a dolphin.
These are the days where they had a heck of a lot of rum ration.
Well, yeah. Going by the rum rations we were looking into last week, I mean, yeah. You can probably see why, yeah.
And actually, the diary of Christopher Columbus in 1493, says the day before, when the Admiral was going to the Rio del Oro, he said he saw 3 mermaids who came quite high out of the water, but were not as pretty as they are depicted, for somehow in the face they look like men. He said that he saw some in Guinea on the coast of Manguta.
Right, so he wasn't too impressed. He was a bit disappointed. No. He felt let down, Christopher.
Yeah, maybe they were sea cows.
Maybe they were.
Yeah.
But one thing that strikes me is the extent of how far they come out of the water. You know what I mean? It's like, you see it with dolphins, they come half out the water, don't they? And they're using their tail to balance effectively, you know, and they come out quite high off the water. So it kind of makes me wonder if, I don't know, maybe it's hallucination, maybe it's, you know, like if it's a calm scenario, the crew are like, I don't know, the person is like staring off into the horizons on the ocean, and they're lulled into almost like a meditative state whilst these sightings are happening. So they're not seeing they're seeing something, but what they're seeing is being translated by their brain as something that's not.
Well, yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, because the reason like dolphins, whales, and can rise so far out of the water is because they have and their tail fins are vertical, as opposed to most other fish and stuff, they're horizontal.
And they're the good runner.
Yeah, so they can sort of like really sort of arch and get their whole upper torsos out of the water, whereas sort of like normal fish can't actually do that. They can jump, but that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when Captain Hailborn approached the coast of Newfoundland again, everybody. Canada's the place to be, right?
It all happens up there, doesn't it?
Seems to. Now, he encountered mermaids who seemed to beckon him. But again, there's that thing of they can beckon you to your watery depth, onto ships to be wrecked, or into the water to drown because they're horrible, horrible creatures. You know, there's a good and a bad side to mermaids, isn't there, when we started looking at it?
That's a touch of the siren mythology coming through.
Yeah.
That's the way I would look at that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but this mythology, this belief system in the power of a mermaid, you know, this belief is still quite apparent in some cultures. I mean, in 2012... essential work on planned reservoirs in Zimbabwe were allegedly halted because mermaids were terrifying workers, or the belief of mermaids were terrifying. You know, I didn't find any much more account than what we've got, to be honest with you. I did try and look into this one a bit deeper because it fascinated me. If mermaids were terrifying workers, were they seeing mermaids? Were they encountering mermaids, or was it just the belief system in mermaids that was causing it? I would go with probably belief system.
Yeah, it's just an I mean, you don't know quite what their sort of like belief system, but if there is a sort of like tradition of sort of mermaids and them being not nice, you know, not more like the traditional sort, you know, omens and stuff like that, you can possibly see why they would want to sort of get the place consecrated or whatever before they go to work.
Well, this caused absolutely havoc. It actually halted the work on the reservoir, and the Minister Samuel Sipepa Nkomo told a parliamentary committee that the only way to solve this problem with the workers was actually to appease the mermaids and brew traditional beer and carry out a rite. They agreed, anything, just get the workers working kind of scenario.
Give them beer.
Yeah,
that would get them.
Yeah, give them all beer, give the spirits beer, it'll all be fine. And
it'll all be all right.
Minister Ignatius Chombo said the government wants to give the population what it needs, so we need to do this so the repairs can be carried out. They did this, apparently, sorted the issue, beautiful.
Sweet as a nut.
Do a little ritual, appease the old spirits, you will be fine. Happened. Sorted.
Yeah, but you think about it, that still happens in a lot of places, countries today, and even ones where you consider quite advanced, I suppose. You look at Iceland, when they build roads and stuff, they won't build them through certain areas because of the trolls or the fairies. You know, they actually will sort of plan their road systems specifically to deal with this.
Yeah, trolls.
Trolls, is it trolls? Yeah.
Trolls, I believe, yeah. But there is a massive... I think some Western cultures completely undermine the belief systems. And
especially now.
I mean, when we look at Native America, the troubles they're having coming up against the Western democracy viewpoint, they want the waterline done. They're completely overriding the Native Americans' belief systems of land and sacred rights. You know what I mean? It's roughshod, and it's causing clashes between the two cultures within a country. So I do think that is something that people need to be aware of when they're planning stuff. You should incorporate that. You know,
you should consult with everyone concerned.
Exactly, and come to a solution, like in Zimbabwe. You know, what's the solution to this problem? We've got a problem with this, so what is the solution? Oh, we'll just do some beer and do a rite. Beautiful, sorted. They did that. You know, it solved the problem. The workers went back, fixed the reservoirs, the mermaids were happy. Whether you believe in them or not, it doesn't matter. Everybody's happy. And it gets the job done that you need done.
Yeah.
You know, so I do think that's needed more, even if it is a completely mythological creature and no proof in fact or scientific basis, but you've got to.
You certainly have
got compassion and respect for the land and the people's belief systems.
And it would probably do us a lot of good as well to get in touch and sort of, and make us more considerate instead of just bulldozing everything in sight in a straight line.
Now, one of the interesting things I did... I'll get off my soapbox.
Right, go on, put it away.
Put it away again. Now, I found this incredibly interesting because this is actually not on the sea. This is actually on the land. This is actually a pool that is in the Peak District. It's called Mermaid's Pool.
That's original.
I know, right? Now, it was actually thought that the pool itself was actually really popular for ancient Celtic water worship rituals. The water is actually salinated, which for an inland lake is unusual.
So what, it's salted then?
Yeah, salinated. And secondly, the nearby waterfall of Kinder Downfall often appears to have the mythical quality of flowing upwards on a blustery day.
You could argue this sort of pool or lake or whatever, it is known in the area to have some sort of sacred sort of past. Yeah. It has been revered for a long time.
Yeah, it has been. Now, the Mermaid's Pool is believed to offer healing qualities for those brave enough to bathe in it. And if you want eternal life, the best time to visit it is actually at midnight at Easter. And that's the only time of the year when the mermaid is said to appear. And if she likes you, she'll grant you the gift of immortality. If she doesn't like you, then she's going to pull you to your death.
Oh, down into the depths. Oh, dear. You can tell why these sort of like mermaids are women, aren't they? Cruel. They can be cruel as anything.
No comment. The second mermaid is said to live in Blackmere Pool on the southwestern tip of the Staffordshire Peak District. Now, I love this. This has got a whole legend attached to it. It has. And it's alleged that she was brought there 100 years ago by a sailor. So he caught her, took her inland, popped her in the lake, as you do. And it's actually a love story.
Oh, I can imagine that, and that must have been a chat-up line. Do you fancy coming back to my lake, love, a bit later?
There are two versions of this story, though, I will say that. The first is a beautiful young woman who rejected the advances of a local man called Joshua Linnett. He didn't accept that. He accused her of being a witch, and I think he had a bit of charm and a bit of sway. And he managed to convince the local townsfolk to drown her in Blackmere Pond. However, when on her last breath, the young woman actually cursed Joshua, and 3 days later his body was found by the pool, his face covered in claw marks. And it is said that it is her spirit that still haunts the pool in the form of a demon mermaid. Not just any old mermaid, but a demon mermaid.
Maybe we could put that place on a road trip.
Well, yeah, so we've got two mermaid sort of pools. They're sort of roughly in the same area from what I can gather. So, yeah, perhaps one day we'll get up that way. Well, we're often up that way. It's not far up from where you are now, Paul. So,
no, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
And the other version is that they fell in love, and after the sailor's death, the mermaid became angry and began to started to haunt the lakes because she couldn't get back to the sea. So she thought she was betrayed by the man who effectively brought her off. So there's the two stories for you that you can go. But it is strange. Blackmere Pool, allegedly, livestock are said to refuse to drink from it, and birds allegedly never fly across it.
Oh, right, so it has that sort of allure to it, yeah.
Well, we're going to have to check that one out.
Yeah.
I think so, because many of
we'll have to go and borrow a farmer's sheep.
Yeah.
Or maybe we should take Marley the hellhound.
That's a good idea, actually.
He could do with getting out, yeah, we'll take Marley.
Yeah,
he likes the water, doesn't he?
No, he's been getting out an awful lot. He doesn't like it. He hides now when I say I'm going out. The last recorded sighting was in the mid-19th century when a group of locals attempted to drain the lake to see if the pool was indeed bottomless as claimed. And as soon as they began digging at the southern end of the pool, you can actually still see the drainage ditch where they started. Apparently the mermaid appeared from the lake and threatened to flood the nearby towns of Leek and Leekfrith until they stopped doing what they do. Now, oh my God, they scared the crap out of them and they ran for the hills. So they didn't finish their job of draining the lake to see if it was bottomless.
So they buggered off halfway through.
They did, yeah, they didn't get that very far. But apparently she appeared to tell them to stop doing it. Go away, you naughty children, kind of scenario. Now, Richard brought one to my attention, which was at a place called Orford Castle.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, there's an actual story of a mermaid there. Or, well, not exactly a mermaid, a merman. Because you actually go to Orford today, because me and Paul actually visited, didn't we, Paul? Was it last summer now?
Yes.
And,
it was,
yes.
And, was bad out.
It seems all... and such a long time ago, but Orford is actually it was actually quite a major port in its day, although you wouldn't actually see much suggestion of it now. But it was a group of fishermen, and one day they brought back a remarkable catch. They were spending the day out trawling the waters just off the coast, and they noticed in their nets an unusually heavy something unusually heavy, and they discovered a strange creature caught amongst the fish. That sounds a bit suspicious. And it turned out that it actually resembled a man who was naked, but he was actually covered in hair, and he had a shaggy beard and a bold crown on top of his head. So he must have been quite an old boy. But this story does actually sort of get to me, because this is actually chronicled quite extensively in the actual castle and chronicles. And when we was at the castle, Paul, they did actually sort of have a exhibit to this, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, yeah.
Yeah, so they actually took him back to the castle, and he actually sort of stayed there, from what I can make out. And although they couldn't get a lot out of him, he could basically just grunt, and that's about it. They did actually sort of feed him fish, which he had the habit of actually wringing the moisture out of it first. So you can imagine they gave him a fish, and he would sort of wring it out like a cloth, and then eat it. This is the funniest thing. They actually took him to church one Sunday as well. So they took him out and about a bit, and they were quite surprised that he didn't recognise the mass. So there was actually, a bit of suspicion of where this man actually come from. But he seemed to actually like living at the castle, because they actually used to sort of take him out and about, and they would even let him have his daily swim. But one day, alas, they actually took him out, and he went for a swim, sort of dunked below the waves, and was never seen again.
Aww.
But a weird story about the merman of Orford. And you actually walk around the village today, you do see a lot of iconography and carvings and statues actually to the merman. He's quite a local sort of inhabitant.
Interesting. Was it a sailor that had fallen overseas that they managed to cast in their nets, and who had had a mental breakdown, so had lost his humanity almost whilst he was adrift at sea? Because there's no mention of a tail, is like him having a tail. It's no,
he's just a man, sort of dishevelled, and this does actually point to an actual event. It's quite well documented. It's not even sort of, there's no sort of mythological element. It's quite matter of fact. It reminds me a bit, Paul, of the sort of like something like the Green Children of Woolpit.
I was thinking that actually, yeah.
Again, that is sort of something that just that pops up in the historical record, and reliable historical records, documents and stuff. And this is another case of it. It's something that actually pops up and is taken very matter-of-factly, as opposed there's no sort of mythical element. There's nothing in it to sort of suggest, it's, and anything else, but it was actually a retelling of an actual event.
I find it fascinating because he could easily have, they took him out for his daily swim. You don't know how old he was or his physical conditions. He might have had a heart attack and died and not just swam off into the ocean because he was dead enough. I don't know. It's an interesting tale, isn't it?
It's an interesting anecdote. I mean, it's, but from the description, they call it the merman, for the connection of coming from the sea. But from the description, perhaps they couldn't get any sense out of him because he was, foreign, spoke a different language, could have been Dutch, Flemish, perhaps, or something like that, and even sort of during this period, there was a lot of commerce going to and from the continent. I mean, and that part of East Anglia was quite a little hub. So, people sort of falling overboard ships or something. Yeah. Perfect.
Who knows indeed. Now, you can't really go much further without talking about West Cornwall, Cornwall. Down that area. Yeah. They've got a huge mermaid mythology down there. And in the small village...
Zena,
the mermaid of Zena. Now, again, we've got a huge, a whole story regarding this one. Paul, did you want to relate this one?
Okay, well, I've been to Cornwall quite a lot, and I've never actually been to this area, so I just found it quite interesting, because some of the places that they talk about is where I've been.
Okay.
The small village of Zena huddles around a medieval church between West Cornwall moors and North Cornish coast, not far from St Ives. And in the church, they've got carved a wooden strange figure of a mermaid depicted with long flowing hair and a mirror in one hand and a comb in the other, because this mermaid is depicted to be very vain. It's called the Mermaid of Zena. Legend has it that many years ago, a richly dressed and beautiful lady occasionally attended the church at Zena, but nobody knew who she was or where she came from. But her unusual beauty and lovely voice made her the subject of much discussion. A lot of people wanted to get to know her or want to be suitors for her that were from in the village. So one of the local men, Matthew Truella, he was apparently a young, handsome, eligible bachelor, and they said that he had the best singing voice in the village, so he took it upon himself to find out more about this woman. And after a service one Sunday, the lady smiled at him, so he had decided to take his chances and follow her off on the way off to the cliffs. And she walked up to the cliffs, and he basically followed, and he would never return to Zena. So it was just a missing person, So years passed, and Matthew Truella's unexplained disappearance faded into the past. And then one Sunday morning, a ship cast an anchor off of Pendower Cove, which was near Zena, and the vessel's captain was sitting on deck, and he heard a beautiful voice hailing him from the sea. Again, very much like the sirens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Looking over the edge of the ship, as you would, he saw a beautiful young mermaid with long blonde hair and flowing all around her and stuff. And she asked him if he would be so kind to raise his anchor as it was resting upon the doorway of her house. And she explained that to him, and she wanted to get back to her husband, Matthew, and her children for it. So basically, it was like she just jumped back into the water. Matthew followed, and they set up a house and had lots of kids, and
lived happily ever after. Also, the disappearance, but they reckon she took him to her place.
Yeah. Come to
And
mind.
kept
All
inside
from
the
a
bed.
little smile.
Yeah.
But that sort of story seems to have the qualities of the sort of like the more sort of like the childhood mind of the mermaid, the long hair, the mirror, the comb. You know, that's certainly sort of a folk sort of idea that most people will have of what a mermaid actually looks like.
It does. The unexplained disappearance of Matthew, though, and it does seem strange that if this account is true, and we didn't find any logbook kind of references to this, you know, but they reckon that the woman stranger, was actually one of the daughters of the King of the Ocean, a mermaid by the name of Montveron.
Montveron.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Now they use it as a warning to other men about the dangers of mermaids.
Yeah. Don't trust a mermaid on a date. Yeah, you don't know what will happen.
No, so she says, "Get off my door." You go. That's it. Yeah.
Get off my door with your anchor.
Yeah, that must have made a hell of a bang when it hit. Who the hell is that?
There is another
At this hour.
Yeah, there is another version of the story where Matthew was singing in the church, and his voice drew her to the church, and he heard her sigh, just outside the church. She was in awe of his voice, and she would come to hear him every night, and you know, basically, that was it. Really, it was love at first sight the minute he saw her.
No.
And the mermaid was frightened, made her way back to the sea with Matthew, but the townsfolk were in pursuit. And in a haste to get back to the sea, Montveron became tangled in her dress and tripped. And Matthew saw the tip of her fishtail poking out from beneath her dress. I cannot stay. I am a sea creature and must go back where I belong. Didn't care. He didn't care at this point. He was done. He was in love.
He was besotted, wasn't he?
He certainly was. And so he picked her up, ran into the sea, never to be seen again. So that's the other side of the story. Yeah.
Yeah, and now they're singing below the waves.
Now they're singing together below the waves. But reports are still, again, we've, Cornwall, Devon coast, there's a huge mythology. But we found this when we looked at smuggling in a smuggling show. That area has got a huge, they love a good tale, don't they? They love to dress it up into folklore down that way.
They are pretty much the seafarers of the UK, aren't they? Because a lot of towns and villages, especially around that area, are little fishing villages and marinas and things like that. I mean, we've got them dotted about the whole country, but it seems like there's a huge concentration around that. Because, you've got like the Irish Sea there and the Atlantic and the English Channel as well, sort of comes in a little bit further along, but, it's all of... You've got three different areas.
Effectively, the actual county of Cornwall is more or less an island anyway. You think it's surrounded three sides by sea, and I think the river sort of that separates it from Devon actually cuts the whole county technically off from the English mainland.
Okay.
I think it's only joined at the top by about 5 miles between that and the Bristol Channel. So,
But, when you go down that way, there is a huge... still to this day, they do gravitate towards the folklore and mythology. I mean, Boscastle has got the Museum of Witchcraft down there, and they do embrace it still, don't they? And there's quite often you'll find waterfalls or areas, even onto the moors. That whole area in the UK, I would say, is probably more saturated with folklore and mythology than the rest of the UK. I mean, we all have little tales in our area, but the Devon, Somerset, Cornwall area is absolutely fascinating in regards to that study.
Oh yeah, I do enjoy the West Country.
I love it, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful area. If you ever get a chance to visit that area, it's well worth it. And it's got a whole maritime historical, history all to itself down there, and it is absolutely fascinating when you look into it. We're actually coming to the end of the show, boys.
That was really quick.
That's
enjoyed that one.
Quick. Before we go, I just want to quickly talk to Paul. He's undergoing an experiment at the moment. Now, Paul, I don't know if you've kind of got this vibe throughout the last few shows. He can be quite cynical in regards to spirituality.
Never.
No, not me.
I've never heard him say a cynical thing about that before, Ken.
So, in pure, fashion of trying to understand a different perspective, he's undertaking an experiment at the moment. Upon conversations that myself and other people have had with him, trying to explain some of the things that we deal with or we work or, how it happens, sometimes the only the only validation you're going to get is if you try it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
If you
You've
try
got to try these things.
You experiment. What do you get out of it? We're talking to you. It's like talking at somebody to explain what the colour red is when they've never seen the colour red. It's very difficult to translate that. Paul is actually undertaking this experiment of going through a meditation and guided journey to meet his spirit guides, aren't you?
I am, yeah. It's coming along slowly.
Mm-hmm.
I've had one session, which was actually undertaking some of the meditation and opening up chakras and stuff like that, and going into what you might think is a spirit world sort of thing, and trying to meet my spirit guide, but I haven't quite managed that yet.
But it was give yourself a try.
Yeah, I mean that was my first session.
Easy. Yeah.
I did have a second session for last night, but the person that volunteered to tutor me through it, we just got talking about the spiritual side, what we wanted to get out of it, stuff like that. So it was more of a theory-based conversation. So next week we're going to then go back in and try and do the spirit guided meditation to meet the spirit guide as well next week.
Now, Paul is going to be documenting this. He's going to be blogging about his experiences on his journey through this. It's not a one session thing. He's going to be doing several sessions on this to go through and try and embrace it. And he's going to be documenting that in some blogs, which if you want to see the progression and, see how he gets on, you're going to have to go over to www.paranormalconcept.com. And he will be releasing the blogs very shortly, or check us out on Facebook, the Paranormal Concept Show over on there. But we have actually come to the end of the show today. Next week we're going from the sea onto our plates, and we've got the lovely Amanda Woomer from Spook Eats on to talk about her journey through the paranormal field. On that note, we're exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network here on the Paranormal Concept Show. Join us every Tuesday for your latest show. Say good night, guys.
Good night, guys.
Good night, guys.